Hello and welcome back. We are Simon and Per from Infantology, which is a strange think tank about the cultural and societal impact on society, well, by digitization. So when the world becomes digital, what happens with our culture and society? And this was more of something you didn't read about every day when we started in 2003, as you might imagine. Now our role is less groundbreaking. On the other hand, there are more people for us to talk to. So it's more interesting times to live in now. I presented myself as a cognitive scientist and an interaction designer, so that's about it. We didn't present actually a talk. We have prepared themes rather, and we want you to join. So feel free to join in.
We'll convert this space to a think tank for the moment. I would like to some brief comments on my interests and take on this. I'm not a technologist. I'm originally a historian of science and ideas, and then I became a human ecologist. And as a human ecologist, I started to think about the role of artifacts in human society. And rather quickly I came to think about artifacts of all kinds: tables, chairs, axes, computers, glasses, whatever, as agents, which in certain ways both make us do things with them because they are like they are, so to speak, and they constrain us in various senses. And a glass can't make me do very many things if I don't want to, and it doesn't do anything on its own, but still it has, if you analyze social systems and you only think about human beings as the only agents in a social system, you miss a lot of things. If you start to think about artifacts as agents in the system, you get a very different perspective. And nowadays, when you have artifacts which do things on their own, computers and computer networks, it starts to get. I had great difficulty persuading people to think at all of artifacts as agents, because most people think of artifacts as passive objects which we use, and that's it. Artifacts never do anything to us. But nowadays we have computers which do things without our knowledge and do things to us, and so it's become really interesting to think about artifacts. But I won't dwell on this. I would like to start with a question. Which things in this room are connected to the internet right now? How many objects right now in this room are connected to the internet? Is there any way to sort of count them?
Filmed, right? So they're connected in a...
Yeah, so like a dozen.
I have one here.
Yeah.
But you have to, because there's other stuff in this building probably that's.
Yeah, we'll
yes,
take
that's
that.
the point.
Yeah, we'll take.
So
that.
let's
So
think about this
just-
for a couple of minutes.
Yeah. So come with suggestions and we will note.
It's easy then. Everyone's phones. All the
Yeah, so a
computers,
dozen- a dozen
all this
phones.
simple stuff.
20 phones, 20 computers. Now we've dealt with that.
So now we dealt with all the personal.
Yeah.
There might be something, but then you have probably the back system, whatever, the air things that's somehow connected, because there's someone there kind of checking on whatever's going on with that.
There's an Apple TV in the corner.
Come on, any more things?
Is it the printer? Probably an alarm system.
The router and switches
Mhm.
for what we do.
kind of checking the electricity that goes to this particular place somewhere.
We probably missed some things.
Most likely.
So when we speak about the Internet of Things, what are we talking about? Are we talking about all these things, or are we talking about a subspace or a subgroup?
Or are we talking about that kind of future things that we are perhaps designing in the future?
Yes, or are we talking about, or are we excluding the Internet of Things, the part of the Internet of Things which we have with us or on us, or are we talking about the Internet of Things which are external to us?
That's such a big question. I mean, I think that both those things could fall in both as subcategories, but also probably more things that we haven't thought about. So just multiply by 500.
Yeah, by 500.
And
But
because
there was no answer. There must be some more answers. Yes, please.
So I think about it. So in our phones and our computers, we have a multitude of apps, right? Well, there are some things that are more like appliances, like for example the little printer, but it's not a slave device to another device. That's I wouldn't dare to make that the qualification, but that's something I tend to think about. I think something that's more appliance-like than a multi-purpose device that can do all kinds of things.
Okay, so you think that the dumb devices, they are part of the Internet of Things, and the smart devices are like not part of Internet of Things. No, just
Sure.
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because
yeah.
okay.
Please.
If you start to ask questions like these, I already asked you which things in this room are connected to the Internet right now. Let's continue. What kinds of data are these things collecting, and what happens to it is one question. How can we control what it knows about us, and who or what else gets to know it too? What can we do to prevent someone or something else's smart thing from recording information about us? What happens if these things get hacked? What are our legal rights? We've talked about this before regarding the data which is gathered, sold and resold. If you want to ask these kinds of questions to the Internet of Things field, you have to define what you're talking about. You have to be very clear about, are you talking about what Anders suggests we should talk about? Or should we talk about all these things? Or should we talk about in which ways they are connected and in which ways they can be connected? What are we talking about? And speaking of ethics, at which point do the ethical questions pop up? Do they pop up in relation to electric power, or do they pop up in the way an alarm system interacts with electric power, or do they pop up in the design of computer interfaces? Where do they pop up? Where do you find the most difficult, the most urgent ethical questions?
Sorry for making this very, very difficult, but
Yeah,
it's kind of it's kind of more stimulating that way.
And we want to make it difficult because it is really difficult.
Yes.
It's it's easy to make it simple.
Yeah.
But if you start to think about the actual existence of all these things,
Yes.
and how they interact, it becomes difficult. And we should realize at the start, before beginning to discuss ethical questions, we should realize how difficult it is.
So, for example,
Otherwise, we will be talking about something else. We won't be talking about what is actually happening, what we are actually doing, what we are actually implementing.
So, for example, your phones. Just a minute. Your phones, are they collecting data right now?
If they're on, they're probably somehow doing that. Or
Yes.
someone is collecting it, even if the phone itself might not do it.
Yes.
Because you have an operator, and he
Yes.
knows where you are, and he
So,
knows what you do.
Yes. So there was a nice, I will not show that, there was a nice visualization of a conference where they had taken all the persons going from one room to another, because they could see that on the devices trying to connect to the Wi-Fi. And that is one thing that your phone normally does. When you go in town and there is a Wi-Fi network, the phone doesn't ask you. It just is on by default, and it sends, and then it sends the MAC address, and that is a unique identifier, and then the Wi-Fi node knows that this phone has been here. I think there was this in London. There was this
Garbage
dustbin,
bins.
garbage bins collecting the data of all the phones and other devices. I don't know what happened with the data, but it was revealed that it was collecting it.
Yeah, so I think the idea was to sort of map people flow through
Okay, yeah.
past
Yeah.
several garbage bins.
Okay.
So it would be then anonymous in a sense, because it would just be these MAC addresses.
Yeah.
And then it's easy to see how you could then make it not anonymous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. It's like the patterns that and we will come back to that. The patterns that are so valuable when you see them as patterns, and it's so like innocent and just one point when you see it as one point, and when you look at one device or one place in the city, it's like you don't see the pattern. But when you start to look at people and patterns of moving people and moving devices, it's completely evident who is doing the traveling, and you could, I'm sure that you could identify many of the people if you have that data. Okay, so your phones are collecting lots of data and sending lots of data right now. Your computers, I think that the computer is actually the most intelligent stuff, and the device, and it's not so dangerous. You're rather aware of what kind of data a computer gets and sends. And there has been lots of discussion of what the computer does, much more than there is now about what the other stuff in the Internet of Things send and receive. What about the ventilation system?
Well, it's not going to tell you too much about us. I don't think they built that into it.
No.
It's going to tell whatever heating is on and how much air, etc. And someone's going to whatever kind of or whatever it's built somewhere down the line.
But probably it could know, given that it knows that one window is open and the outer temperature, it could know how many people are in here right now. Because it knows how much heat it sends to this office.
Yeah, so I guess you could,
Yeah.
you could draw that out of the data if you have
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Other things, ventilation system, not much else, I guess. Yes, oh, sorry, I forgot to add you to the speaker list.
No, that's okay. I'm just trying to just follow along here. I really like the course that you're taking here. And I love the discussion of how you framed it in the beginning in terms of artifacts. And, because these artifacts are usually tools. I mean, a glass of water is actually pretty powerful. But if you add a sensor in there, and the sensor is telling it that it always needs to be full, does the user need to be drinking it? Is that a hazard to the user? And are these, is this I guess I'm just trying to. I'm not sure where to go with my question, but I just wanted to give another kind of example because I kind of liked. I wanted to participate in the discussion.
Yeah.
I think also one reason that we have to start thinking about things differently, all kinds of things, including everyday things, but in this case in particular, of course, digital things interconnected in various ways, is that because you have to ask, like I sort of began to do earlier, you have to ask where are the ethical conundrums and decision possibilities actually located in the system? Because we tend to think about ourselves as human beings as the only ones making ethical decisions. But once you have implemented some kind of vision of what we would like to do or know in artifacts and in digital systems, those systems sort of take over the responsibility from us. And the more complex they get, and the more interconnected they get, the fuzzier it all becomes for us. But very many decisions, very many trends are actually the product of what things are doing, and not there's no human decision involved at all. And that trend, that discrepancy is increasing, which makes it very hard for us to discuss the ethical issues. And I think we are doing ourselves a disservice to reduce that discussion to only be about what we as individuals should or could choose in various contexts. That's an important discussion in itself. I'm not arguing against your point of view. You shouldn't take it like that. But I think that the context of the discussion, if you're going to be realistic in the world we are already living in, have to expand. And we don't have any, we actually do not have any concepts for talking about this. It sort of ties in with what you said about understanding the network space, and we don't have very good concepts or models for that either. And when we connect that kind of problem with values and such things which we care about, it becomes even worse. But I don't think it's hopeless. I think we are really more intelligent and smarter than we sometimes realize ourselves. I think it's quite possible to construct metaphors, ways of telling stories about this that can actually help us think adequately about it. But they will have to be realistic, and they will have to be knowledgeable about all these things. And how can they become that? They can become that if engineers, designers, interaction designers, all kinds of designers, business people start to talk to each other about these problems and see to it that they keep it realistic and do not try to simplify things, because it's easier to think. It's simple. We have to actually confront the fact that it's very, very difficult, but I don't think it's impossible. We have to start somewhere, and one starting point is to state what I've just said.
I was just going to make a contribution, just that I don't know if anyone read about the airplane crash from, I think it was France to Brazil. The plane was on autopilot, and there was an inexperienced pilot. But basically how the whole thing happened is the same problem. So I just wanted to give an example.
I don't understand.
Basically the autopilot has a very fuzzy set of laws, or logic that it uses. So when there is someone controlling the system, controlling the yoke for the plane, I don't know a lot about how the system works, but for me it was a fascinating subject to begin to understand in terms of our place in dealing with technology. So I just wanted, if anyone wasn't, I just again wanted to add an example which I thought was pertinent to your discussion.
You don't know exactly what happened? I think just on that topic, it was a combination, because I read a big article about it. It's quite interesting. It was an autopilot, and then they went into some sort of turbulence. And when an experienced pilot was gonna, take over, the thing, it was some sort of reading on a display that he kind of kept pulling it tighter and tighter, and he actually took the plane upwards where he should have been leveling off. So what happened is the plane comes into a stall and then falls straight down into the ocean. And then everyone, of course, died because they fell, I don't know how many thousands of meters. Okay. 10 kilometers or something.
But that's sort of, I mean, potentially, these are the implications, the long-term implications, as you said, the example of the circulation system that knows that there are people, somewhere. I think it's such an interesting subject.
It's kind of interesting also, it's like, what can you use it for?
There was this.
Yes.
And I was kind of thinking, the ventilation thing, when you said you could probably calculate how many people are in here.
Yeah.
Okay, the fire brigade or the fire department, okay, you have a fire here and you have to know where people are, those are the things.
Interesting. Yeah. There was this Airbnb host who had an apartment for rent, and he had this Nest thermostat. You know about the Nest thermostat? It's an Internet of Things device. You can control it with an app. Probably there is some in a drawer. No, you don't have it.
No, it doesn't work here in Sweden.
No,
in Europe.
Okay.
Yeah, because we don't have those personal thermostats.
Okay. Anyhow, it has several features, and one of them is that you can control the temperature, but it also has an automatic feature to reduce the temperature in a room when there is nobody present. So it has a small presence sensor. It's not a camera. It's just the motion sensor. And it turns out that this feature is also internet enabled. And then, well, it doesn't matter for the moment. This means that
Distracting, is it?
oh, good gracious. We'll do that like this and like this. Good. And this means that the signal of motion and presence was also transmitted to this guy at a remote location. This meant that he could know if his guests had arrived or not. And that was a bit unintended. Of course it was unintended, but it was also that it had this Nest thermostat. It has been on the market for a while, and it was not until now, like at least 18 months after that somebody realized that, oh, this is an interesting feature, but it could also be used for other purposes. So it takes so long time before you realize what the interconnectedness means, and that is also because not so many people are trained in the systems thinking. There was before a systems thinking and system theory and stuff in universities and so, but now it's a kind of new systems thinking that is a new, let's call it a new literacy, because it's a nice way of calling it.
One possible method to start to think about the kind of problems we're facing here. I mean intellectual, theoretical problems, basically, is to ask the question to different kinds of things. What are we to them? How do they see us? There's a concept from ethology, the study of human behavior originally. At least it was spread there at the most. It's a German word, Umwelt. Anyone who's heard of it? A guy called Jakob von Uexküll wrote a book on the Umwelts of animals, and the Umwelt is the world as it appears to an organism, and that is all that organism knows and is aware of in any way whatsoever. And so his a famous example is that of a tick, the nasty little fellows who suck your blood.
Festing, yeah.
Festing in Swedish, which has a very restricted Umwelt. There's a kind of acid it's sensitive to. What's the acid?
Butter acid.
Butter acid, yeah. It's about the only thing a tick knows is whether butter acid is present in its vicinity or not. Because if butter acid is present, this means a mammal is present. And it can jump onto the mammal and get its food, the mammal's blood. So it's a very restricted Umwelt. If you speak about, if you now think about ourselves, human beings, our Umwelts are, in one way, the product of our biology, but in another way, very significant way, it's a product of our culture, of how we think, of the stories we tell each other about how the world works, and we are really unable to look outside of those bubbles. I won't get into that because any further regarding human beings, and just to sort of give an idea of what the Umwelt concept means. But what can we see if we apply the Umwelt concept to artifacts? What is the Umwelt of a glass?
Ooh, that's difficult.
Yeah.
So like refraction, or
No,
It knows it's still, right?
No,
No.
it doesn't know that.
Does it know anything at all?
No, I wouldn't say that.
No. Skip class then.
Yeah.
And take some simple Internet of Thing device.
Or a thermostat.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the glass, I mean, it's kind of because it doesn't have this, we don't think it has any of the senses that we do. So we think about it, we think of the glass as kind of looking at us, if it could, in the senses we use. So vision, whatever, touch, whatever. But it doesn't have that, so that's irrelevant. So we don't have a conceptual model of understanding that. I think kind of if you look at sort of what's in Japanese culture, for instance, where they look at sort of animism and actually every object, I don't know if they call it a soul or what they call it, but it has something which we then would interpret as living, which makes it able to kind of perceive the world.
Yes.
But that perception is completely different than what our perception of the object is.
Yeah. I don't want to exclude like inanimate or inagent objects. I want to give another example which makes it a bit more clear. When you look at a chess game, for example, I've been told that the Russian chess masters they listen to their chess pieces, and that is the exact same method. So they kind of talk to their chess pieces, and they ask, for example, the bishop, "Are you happy when you're standing there? Are you happy?" And it's a difference with the glass, because the glass has no like purpose in the game. You can say that it's unhappy if it's empty in one way, because it's designed to be filled and emptied, etc. And in that way, that would be the Umwelt of and the purpose of the glass. But the chess players, they use this actually to make better use of their pieces on the chessboard. And I found similar things in a book on creativity by two persons called Ruth Bernstein, I think. You can find it if you want, or I can give you the reference. And it's called Empathizing. And it's a really interesting way of turning around, so that you look at the things and you ask them things like that. Are you happy? Are you fulfilling your goals? And in my way of thinking, it's possible to tell if an Internet of Things device is happy or not. And that is if it's sending out data, because it's designed to interact with data. That is what it's for. And I would say that as the world works, the connected devices want to be of service, and that's one reason why they will not like shut themselves down. They will try to be of service, and
which means that once you've implemented them in some way, you're stuck with them.
In one way, yes, and in another way, completely in the same world of reasoning, it's possible to turn them off. And now, if there are other things that we have brought to life, like war robots. And now it turns out that the soldiers that are controlling the war robots, they cannot turn them off. And there are other. It's not strictly related to. Well, it's not strictly tied to the reasoning in Internet of Things, but it's the same line of reasoning, I would say, that when you have brought something to life in the way that you are interacting with it in an intimate way, that like you do with a war robot, then you have created something that is not easy to just turn off. There have been several articles the last few months about the problem that the U.S. Army now has with that soldiers don't want to send their war robots in dangerous missions, because they are afraid that they will not come back.
Mm-hmm. There's also been discussion for several years now in the military, several military troop kinds in the U.S. about war robots. In which ways you will be able to implement ethics into them, so that they will know when they do something wrong. How do you implement the Geneva Convention in a robot? And that's a quite serious discussion. And this is how far we have come when it comes to speaking about the ethics of technology. It's not just our use of technology, what we would wish technology to do. It also has sort of started to turn into the question of how do we educate our technology? It's an extremely strange situation and quite new to humankind.
A similar a similar thing was when people started to discuss these driverless cars, like the Google driverless car, and that the driverless car, one of the things that you must do is to let it make a difference between, for example, different kinds of persons. So if it sees a baby carriage, it must choose not to it must avoid that at all cost, because in our society we have chosen that to be the most valuable thing to keep in society. So that, and that's what I mean with when I briefly before I took up what properties of the world do we have to put into the things that we design. So, for example, do we have to implement the Geneva Convention? Yeah, probably in some of the devices we build. And when we make changes to the legislation, we'll have to put that in. We have to update the things with the new version of the legislation, which is kind of tedious.
So you see what we're doing here. We are trying to get across sort of a vision or idea about what are the real challenges, what are the complexity of it, how it really puts extremely severe demands on our ability to collaborate and discuss these things, whichever function or role we have in different companies and different agencies or whatever. A whole new kind of dialogue about what it means to be human and what our relationship to the world we build should be or could be. So we, as is very obvious, we don't have any answers. We just would like to sort of lift the discussion a few levels.
Yeah, and that's why we want to bring you in already.
But what if we start talking about legislation and like program systems, start talking about climate change? We want these machines to guide us the best way they can in climate change. They will make choices that are not like legislative, but much more radical or much more. I mean, I'm thinking about like in the list here. I think like electric consumption, maybe the most ethical question, like where do you like your individual choice stops and where do we start cutting that off because it's too dangerous? I mean,
a big topic and area of discussion in that regard, I would say, is the discussion and beginning implementation of what is called smart cities, which ways to utilize all the data that is sent from various devices and sort of use this for optimization of various things, like energy consumption and travel, logistics, and whatever.
I would say that in some ways, in those like smart buildings and stuff, in some ways there is a good discussion, but I don't want it to center on like reminding me about turning off the light and things like that, because the energy appliances that we can control, their energy consumption is so small compared to the overall energy consumption that per person in society. I've heard that in our Western countries there is around 10,000 watts continuous effect. And that is much more than I can control if I turn off the lights.
yeah, but you can turn off all the electrical cars, so you can't even go to buy car tomorrow because the carbon dioxide level is reached that day. I mean, that's a pretty big impact.
Yeah,
though.
Yeah,
I guess.
I guess so, but.
So we don't have any really
but
great
we can
logical conclusion to this.
No.
But maybe you have a finishing comment here or something.
I just want to because we have these. We have been taking this from different perspectives and actually you started with one of these observations that we wanted to come back to. So this is kind of three perspectives: how we look at things, how things look at us, and then how can we set. And this is like at the ground and up, and we have been discussing that also with you. How can we set up goals that lead to positive development and not, and what happens with negative goals and and purposefully evil design, etc. So let me just go through these briefly, and then I hope that you have like question afterwards. Maybe it's easier to come with them when we are finally not talking.
No, but can I just say one
yes,
thing then, if you
good.
go into this?
Yeah.
So, if I followed correctly, like these things that are less smart, they are harder to empathize with,
Yes.
or we don't think of it, or
We don't
there's a challenge
think of
there.
it. Yeah.
And if these things are more advanced, like a drone or a
Mhm.
war bot or whatever, then it makes it almost too easy to empathize.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's
Or
the,
anthropomorphize.
that word, yes.
Yeah. So so to look at them as if they are human, even.
Mm.
So
So, is it the challenge that we just compare them perhaps with ourselves and being human, and that we don't have a category, or that we?
well, actually, I think that the word empathizing for this kind of getting to know the Umwelt, I think that word is a bit misleading. It's more of an intellectual venture than of feeling with them. It's more to us to see the world as they see the world, and to understand what they want through their eyes, not through my eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're doing it wrong, or?
No, I don't know.
Or
Yeah,
what's the-
I don't
That
think
comes
that
back to what I started to talk about, like artifacts as agents.
Yeah.
If you look at a simple device, a sensor or something, as an agent, and you think of it as an agent, something that does things, it is like you in that way. You also do things, and that thing does things. Then you will think of it semi-automatically in a different way than if you think of it as a tool to be used.
because then
Yes.
you
Changes
think
the
about,
perspective in a very basic way. And what I would like to see in the future is more of that kind of change of perspective. It's very simple to just say it now and give a simple example, but it quickly becomes more difficult and demanding if you have a lot of things and if they do very many things on their own and so on. But if you don't think of it in that way, you will still continue to live in the illusion that you are in control and that they are tools for your use only. But in reality, you are just as much a tool for their use. And that's a quite difficult turn of thought. But I think it's necessary. And the more intelligent the things get, the more intelligent their interconnections between them get, the more they will use us without our knowing of it. And some of us, some companies, some authorities, some knowledgeable people will learn how to think like the things and use other human beings like the thing in the ways that the things make possible. And you can't talk about that, and you can't criticize it or anything if you continue to think about things as just tools.
But it's more of an ecology
Yeah.
way of
Yes,
thinking.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
thank you.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, many aspects of this comes from two philosophers. One is Richard Dawkins and one is Daniel Dennett. And for those of you who want to read more in that area, it's interesting to pursue. And so Dawkins was the author of the Selfish Gene, where he showed or reasoned that the gene is only it only wants to propagate its own
A copy of itself
Yeah, a
into
copy
the
of
next generation.
Yes, and Dennett uses another example of research libraries, where he says that the researchers, they are only the library's way of
Making another library.
Yes, of making
That's
another
Dennett.
library. That's
A
Dennett.
scholar
Yeah.
is a library's way of making another library.
Yeah.
That's the way libraries use human beings,
Yes.
making more libraries.
So that's the same shift of perspective, you see? And long before people started to think of Internet of Things, actually. So. Okay, how we look at things, and to come back to what you said, Internet of Things ceased to be an interesting thing to single out 2 years ago, when it could be expected that most people had an Internet of Things device in their pocket. And I think that we should now slowly try to find another term. I don't suggest cyber-physical systems.
For the record.
And then now we have talked about for a long while empathizing and how things look at us. There is an interesting book by Kevin Kelly. It's really nicely written. It builds on it's called What Technology Wants. Anybody here has read it or heard it? Half? Yeah, the good. It's good not to go to the end, because he has had this huge project called the Technium, and that was a blog and really interesting. And then he wrote up this rather long text, and he looks at things from a good perspective. And then in the end, actually, he says that everything that happens now is deterministic, and we cannot do anything about it. And actually, the starting point was the Big Bang. And then I didn't follow him anymore. But I suggest that you have a look at the book, but stop as...
I've criticized his determinism in several writings, but the good question is the very title, What Technology Wants, because and those parts of the book are quite worth reading, because he argues in sort of the way which I just did. We have to start to realize that technology also wants things. It's not just we who want things and use technology to pursue the things we want. It's also that technology wants things, and that's very provocative, and it's very unfamiliar thought.
And actually, to leave this determinism, I think it's the most important thing we can do is to set up goals that can take us to a positive outcome for human beings. And it's to leave this like efficiency and to take away workers and replace them with computers and automation. We must leave that kind of thinking. And I was provoking you or you as an interaction designer, yes, you, when you said that that you wanted to make things easier, and some things have become so easy that now it's more important to make them complicated, because that's the world we want to live in. It's not certain that we want to have this super easy. I don't know if you saw the film WALL-E, but the humans are on another planet or something, and they sit around and drinking soda all their time, and that's not the way we want to live in. So we want to use these technologies to build a world where we actually want to live and to interact.
Yeah. I think it's best to stop there.
Okay, good.
Just confuse things even more.
Okay, good. Questions?
Comments? Criticism?
No, I really like the ecology perspective, because I think a lot of the what do you call it, like this disjointing of how we interact with the real world is about we don't see the consequences of anything. So maybe this technology can actually help us have sensors out in the world and see consequences. And that kind of interesting sort of how you can use technology for good, I guess. It's
And then just
interesting.
let's make it more complicated, because ecology is two things. Ecology, like when people want to be ecological, then it's this kind of good ecology. Okay, it's a good goal to be more ecological because it means that you're more nature friendly or something. The other sense of the world which we normally use is ecology as the interconnected world where we live. So even the zombie apocalypse is an ecology. Okay.
A sustainable ecology.
Yeah, a sustainable ecology, yes. Yes, please.
Just comment in defending myself.
Yeah.
Because, when I said that I really like to make everything more, simpler for people, I was saying simpler as an opposite word for confusing.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I
You
know. I know.
course.
So, people, human beings are really interested in having some challenges.
Yes.
And by designing something that is challenging, and then we can get rid of that catastrophe, that wall E.
Yeah, thank you.
But I would like
Yes.
to add a comment there because I agree with you. And the thing is that the tools that we use for our challenges, the tools shouldn't be difficult to use because it's like they're just a help to make us do the challenges that we like. Like for example, if I want to be dancing, the challenge shouldn't be to put on my shoes. It should be like the dancing steps,
Yeah.
sort of things. And the same goes for technology. Like, if I want to write a book or something, the problem shouldn't be to put down the words. It should be to think about what the book is about. So,
Please.
Yeah. So, in a parallel track, now that nowadays when we spend more time with machines than with humans, how is the design moving in that direction? Like, how do we interact with machines that we don't lose our humanness?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Perhaps it is.
Yeah.
We don't. It's not possible because perhaps we just have to be with each other more.
Yeah. And also there's lots of talking about natural language interfaces and Siri and other stuff. But what few people talk about is that natural language requires both parties to adapt to each other, and I don't think that people are willing to do that. In practice, this means that we'll have to simplify our language to what the machines understand, which is a pity. So we will have to be a bit careful if we want to retain our a bit complex way of talking.
There's a
Yeah.
movie coming called Her,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
which Jacqueline Phoenix or something like that starring, and he
Okay.
buys a new operative system who speaks to him, so it's natural
Mm.
language. And then it's about his relationship with this Siri-like
Okay.
partner, or whatever you want to call it. And I mean, the trailer looks, if you read about it, it looks actually quite interesting because it's a little bit like, I guess it sort of just talks about that, our relationship to a machine entity, and kind of how that can then evolve.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I'll note that.
Yeah, but it's also interesting, like what position to take in this. So language is ever evolving, right? Because of fads and interactions with other languages and what it might be. So that development is still happening, and yeah, I guess you could put a measure on it and say fewer words known by the average Swede than 10 years ago is that's bad. That's what we define as bad. And yeah, I guess that's one way to do it, but there will always be change, and of course the machines have already affected the way we speak.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, maybe it's good to be able to express more things with fewer words.
Perhaps, yeah.
Perhaps.
So how do we
No, I don't
measure
know.
and navigate?
But
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
but we cannot just say, oh, we cannot measure.
no,
We
of
must
course
say, oh, if we take it this way, then this development is good. If we take it this way, then this development is good. So very often it's like, oh, it's either this or this, then just skip it and
And we also have the phenomenon of one particular technology. Let's take an example here. Let's think of internet-connected computers in schools, where every student, every teacher has their own computer. That means that every individual in school has access to a formidable, fantastic learning device, right? That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it, which is has been discovered in every classroom that has implemented this one-to-one computer solution, which is called SWIN, is that it's a very efficient distraction device. And the point is that the very thing which is good is also at the very same time bad. And there's no technological solution to that problem. It boils down to this. What kinds of goals do we have? What do we want? What kind of society, what kind of future do we actually want to strive for? So maybe we should stop discussing technology so much and talk about this, and then talk about which technologies will strengthen what we view as good, and which technologies, or which kind of use of technology, how can we weaken bad use? And it's only we who can do that. So it requires a very extended educational effort to think about things in ways that the very same thing is bad and good, and it depends on you. And that sort of lands the discussion where you ended too, but from a different perspective.
Yeah, so is that just because that's interesting, I find, because we can think about today. So what happened? We gave everyone smartphones, and now everyone sits in the cube and stares at the screen.
Yeah.
And so perhaps you like it, perhaps you don't like it. What if you don't like it? What do you do about it?
Yeah, you have to talk to the guy next to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, what are you doing? Well, you're staring at that thing. Talk to me.
Yeah.
I'm going to hit you in the head and say,
Yeah.
don't disturb me.
Bring band-aids.
But that's how we learn as human beings, by interacting with each other.
Yeah, so, but I just like to bring up another, I don't know how many are familiar with the term design fiction as a concept, a few, yeah. So, as a way of sort of looking at technology that's in emerging technologies and sort of drawing a trajectory. Let's say this was, let's imagine a future with this, well, it's a bit like science fiction, I guess, but you imagine a near future where this technology exists, and then sort of draws out the trajectory to visualize or describe the ways that society and behavior is affected by that technology.
That's
And
what
then
science
you can
fiction
discuss
authors do.
In a way, I would say, but
Some of them, at least, do that
yeah,
very well.
the better ones maybe,
Yeah.
but I think many of them are for I don't know, bang for the buck kind of thing. It's kind of more
Certainly.
Certainly.
Whereas I think what you're talking about is more of how do you describe, sort of say that you would put whatever new things that you can put in. Take the voice interface thing. Okay, how could we make that, real? And what would it sort of, if we look at a situation in, say, a real situation a few years ahead when it actually works, what would that be? And I think that's much more about describing sort of mundane, the kind of everyday things that we do, and it's not Minority Report and the kind of Star Trek kind of things.
Yeah, it's a bit of a possibly a contrast to then marketing departments, perhaps wanting to describe things in terms of cognitive.
But that depends on what you want to do. Then you must have a moral ground, an ethical statement that you must do. Because otherwise you are like the marketing department.
But you can
You
could experiment
you
with.
could have any morals,
that
any
bad?
ethics to do a design fiction.
Yeah, that's. But then if you're an evil guy, you can do then a design fiction, and you can design a fascist society where the train arrives at the right time all the time, and pardon?
No, just saying.
No, but I think that depends on what. But you discarded some of the science fiction writers because they were bad. But I would say that.
No, I wasn't saying they were bad. I was just saying I think kind of what Anders was saying, and if you compare it to science fiction.
Yeah.
Science fiction in its sort of futuristic, trying to kind of paint a world which might have a few things which has gone wrong, or what have happened, and that's not really the thing with design fiction in that sense. I think it's kind of more, okay, if you describe whatever we interact with something, but it's on a set slightly. Well, it could be set in what it looks like right here, but we do it in kind of like this everyday and try to make it maybe a bit more realistic in a sense.
Yeah, make perhaps a way to make our ethics more tangible then.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
So
good.
to
I totally agree. But I think that the ethics must be present.
Well,
before.
In a way, it becomes automatically present once you start such a test or such a design fiction project. You encounter the ethical issues. You have to discuss the ethical issues, right?
Yeah.
But you can decide beforehand that you should make it as realistic as possible during under circumstances, and then you have to take into account all these human ethical and wishes and wrong thinking and.
But if you don't want to, you don't have to take into account the unintended consequences. That's kind of självplågeri, vad heter det? Masochism. Yeah. So that no, because you can say you want a future that looks like this. If you have stakes into the technology, for example, you will design a future, also a design fiction that suits your goals, and it's only as an ethical person looking at both sides, or that you will produce a good design fiction.
Well, I think the purpose is more to, well, as I think of it, is more to put something out there, to sort of prototype an alternate now, or through a story, or through some way of trying to convey it, or an object, right, or the near future, and then you can, someone else can interpret what they read into it, and it might be, of course, completely differently what you have.
Yeah, sure.
What you see, and
but you have also the risk that you are naive, and that you think that this will be great, and you will put something out there that looks great to everybody now, and that no one will think about the possibilities that for example, I don't know, blind people will be completely marginalized when this technology comes out there, or another group that we don't know is upcoming minority. I don't know.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I mean, if we're interested in this subject, it would be really fun to sort of future prototype these as sort of as a one-night kind of deal. You know, like let's try and do a hackathon. Sort of describe. I mean, this is a really. It's not something that it's talked a lot about, but it's. I think it's such an important issue. These sort of goals. What are the goals of your system?
Yeah.
And if we are practitioners in the space, we should potentially understand the methods to both construct good and bad, just for our own.
There was this really interesting article by a guy in Oxford who wrote about the positive things of the surveillance state, and and he wrote it as an exercise, or at least he says that I don't want the surveillance state, but if we are going now into this kind of thing with cameras everywhere and connected systems, let's think about could there be any positive things, and yeah, it's possible to
You could think about quite a lot of positive things. That's
yeah, but it's so strange to, and he talks about like authentication. You don't need any passwords anymore because the system will know where you are, and it will know what data you have the right to have access to. So it will just unlock the computer that you are at.
Yeah.
And
so
that's kind of
privacy.
Yes, and there will be no privacy at all. Yeah.
And I mean, just to even talk about it on a kind of system level, I mean, in the U.S., I come from the U.S., I mean, there's such a stigma about socialism that it's a blind. I mean, they're blind to the power of of this system. I mean, just merely out of ignorance and sort of unlearning what's been learned. That communism is against our system.
It's interesting that you bring it up because the kind of surveillance that they have now in the U.S. is very close to the kind of system that they had before in the Soviet Union. So that it's
just
as if
invisible.
Yes, it's as if now that they don't have this enemy, they have to construct it themselves within themselves, and it's like really, really, really strange. Okay, time is.
I have one last question.
Yeah.
Do you see any other challenges when the goals of what technology wants, what the systems designed by people want, and what people really want? Do you see any other challenges than from a design perspective?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the iPhone and Facebook. It's the system is designed by a human being, and it's made in a way that wants you to interact with it all the time through knowing you better than yourself, because the designer knows psychology and knows what triggers your behavior. So the technology wants something that's not really good for me, being on Facebook all the time. So, and it's out there. What is there any other challenges through changing the system other than redesigning it, or hoping that the designer is ethical?
We took we had coffee today, and we discussed one of these. It was a research project where they could tell.
Yeah, there was a report the other day. I think it was a Swedish research group of psychologists that had devised an algorithm, I think, actually, which was able to tell by looking at individuals' Facebook use whether that individual was at risk of becoming I don't know what the clinical term would be, but psychologically defective in some way, and could predict that fairly accurately, as I gathered. So
There you
one
have-
way of using
you have
Facebook in
one
the future,
case. I think
diagnosing people.
that- Yeah, you can think about the implications, ethical implications of that. Yeah.
Perhaps the really deep challenge is that how many of us know what we need, what we want.
Yeah.
But we should put a parenthesis around that, I think.
Yep.
Tonight at least.
Okay. That's it.